The sound of a vintage baccarat crystal glass shattering against the imported Italian marble floor didn't just break the silence, it stopped time. In the exclusive dining room of the Gilded Oak, 50 of the city's wealthiest patrons froze, their forks hovering halfway to their mouths. All eyes turned to table 4, where Victoria Hastings stood, her face twisted in a snarl that would make a gargoyle weep, pointing a manicured finger at the trembling floor manager. But it wasn't the manager who would end her reign of terror that night. It was the quiet, unassuming waitress, standing in the shadows, holding a rag and a secret that would cost Victoria everything. Nobody knew that the woman pouring the water was the only person in the room who held the deed to Victoria's life. The Gilded Oak was the kind of establishment where the menu didn't have prices. If you had to ask how much the Wagyu beef tartare cost, you were politely escorted out by a security guard named Bronson, who wore suits that cost more than most people's cars. It was a playground for the elite, a sanctuary for the 1%, and on Friday nights, it was the hunting ground of Victoria Hastings. Victoria was not merely a customer, she was a natural disaster in couture. Married to Robert Hastings, a titan of the shipping industry whose net worth fluctuated by the millions daily, Victoria treated the world as her personal doormat. Her reputation preceded her like a drop in barometric pressure before a hurricane. "She's coming," Philip, the restaurant's general manager, whispered into his headset. His face was pale, beads of sweat already forming along his receding hairline. He looked like a man marching to the gallows. Estimated time of arrival, 4 minutes. Everyone, places, now. In the kitchen, the mood shifted from chaotic energy to terrified silence. Chef Gordon, a man who had once thrown a cleaver at a sous chef for overcooking a scallop, wiped his hands nervously on his apron. "Check the silverware," Gordon hissed. "If there is a single water spot on her fork, she will have my head on a pike. And for the love of God, make sure the Chardonnay is chilled to exactly 42 degrees, not 41, not 43. Standing near the service station was the new hire, Stacy Poole. She had only been working at the Gilded Oak for 3 days. She was 32, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a demeanor that was almost too calm for the high-stakes environment of fine dining. While the other servers, mostly aspiring actors or college students, terrified of losing their tips, were hyperventilating. Stacy simply adjusted her apron and checked her notepad. "You don't look scared," whispered Chloe, a 19-year-old hostess who looked on the verge of tears. "You should be scared. Last month, Victoria made a waiter cry because his breathing was too loud. She got him fired on the spot. He has 3 kids. Stacy looked up, her expression unreadable. "I've dealt with difficult people before, Chloe. Wealth doesn't make someone a god. It just makes them loud." "You don't understand," Chloe insisted, her voice trembling. "She's not just difficult. She's cruel. She enjoys it. She comes here specifically to find a target. And since you're the new girl, she's going to eat you alive." Stacy gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't a smile of arrogance, but of something colder. "Calculation. Let her try." The front doors swung open. The air in the restaurant seemed to be sucked out of the room. Victoria Hastings entered. She was a striking woman, though her beauty was hardened by a perpetual sneer. She wore a crimson dress that looked like it had been stitched from the flags of conquered nations, and around her neck hung a diamond necklace heavy enough to anchor a small boat. Behind her trailed Robert Hastings. He was a man who looked like he had been slowly eroded by the tides of his wife's personality. He wore a bespoke tuxedo, but his shoulders were slumped, his eyes tired and focused on the floor. He looked less like a husband and more like a hostage. Philip rushed forward, his smile strained and desperate. "Mrs. Hastings, Mr. Hastings, what an absolute honor. We have your usual table prepared." Victoria didn't even look at him. She breezed past, her perfume, a heavy, cloying scent of tuberose and money, hitting him like a physical blow. She stopped in the center of the room, scanning the dining hall. Her eyes locked onto a table near the window, where a young couple was laughing. "That table," Victoria said, her voice cutting through the ambient jazz music. "I want that one." Philip stammered. Mrs. Hastings, that table is currently occupied. The couple is celebrating their anniversary. We have the private alcove prepared for you. It offers much more seclusion and—" Victoria turned slowly to look at Philip. "Did I stutter, Philip? I said I want that table. Move them." "But Mrs. Hastings—" "Move them." The room watched in horrified silence as Philip, defeated, approached the young couple. The humiliation was palpable as he whispered to them, offering free champagne and apologies. The couple, confused and embarrassed, gathered their things and were shuffled to a smaller table near the kitchen doors. Victoria sat down at the stolen table with a satisfied smirk. She hadn't even looked at the couple she displaced. To her, they weren't people. They were furniture that needed rearranging. "Water!" she barked, snapping her fingers without looking up from her phone. Philip frantically signaled to the waitstaff. He looked at Chloe, who shook her head, terrified. He looked at the senior waiter, Thomas, who suddenly busied himself with a napkin. "I'll take it," Stacy said quietly. Philip looked at the new girl with a mixture of relief and pity. "Godspeed, Stacy. Just, whatever you do, don't look her in the eye." Stacy picked up the crystal pitcher of imported spring water. She walked across the dining room floor, her steps steady, her posture perfect. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't sweating. She approached the table where the dragon waited. Stacy approached the table with the grace of a dancer. She placed 2 coasters down, the linen crisp and white. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Hastings," Stacy said, her voice smooth and professional. "My name is Stacy, and I'll be taking care of you this evening. May I start you with some sparkling or still water?" Victoria didn't look up from her phone. She was scrolling through social media, liking photos of herself. "I asked for water 5 minutes ago. Why am I still waiting?" "My apologies," Stacy said, pouring the water. She filled the glass to the perfect level, not a drop spilled. Victoria finally looked up. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned Stacy. She was looking for a flaw, a loose thread on the uniform, a smudge of makeup, a nervous tick. Finding none seemed to irritate her more. "You're new," Victoria accused. It wasn't a question. "I started this week. Yes, ma'am." "Well, let's hope you're more competent than the idiot who served us last time," Victoria sneered. She picked up the menu, glanced at it for a second, and slammed it shut. "I don't want anything on this menu. It's boring. Tell the chef I want the Dover sole, deboned tableside, but I want it prepared with a lemon caper reduction, not the heavy cream sauce he usually uses to hide the fact that the fish isn't fresh." "The fish is flown in daily, Mrs. Hastings," Stacy said politely. "But I will certainly inform Chef Gordon of your preference." "And the wine," Victoria waved a hand dismissively. "Bring me the 82 Bordeaux, and bring the bottle. I want to inspect the cork. I don't trust your sommelier. He looks like he drinks box wine at home." Robert Hastings sighed, rubbing his temples. "Victoria, please. The staff is doing their best." "Oh, shut up, Robert," she snapped. "If you had a backbone, you'd demand better service. You pay enough for this membership." Stacy turned to Robert. "And for you, sir?" Robert looked up, surprised to be acknowledged as a human being. I'll just have the ribeye, medium rare." "Thank you." Stacy nodded, and retreated to the kitchen. Inside the kitchen, Chef Gordon was pacing. When Stacy relayed the order, his face turned purple. Lemon caper reduction. Does she think this is a roadside diner? That sauce takes 20 minutes to reduce properly. She knows, Stacy said calmly. She does it to test you. Just make it, Chef. She won't eat it anyway. She'll send it back. What? Gordon stopped chopping. How do you know? Just a hunch, Stacy said, picking up the bottle of 1982 Bordeaux from the wine cellar. She returned to the dining room. The atmosphere was tense. Every other diner was eating in hushed tones, afraid to draw the eye of the storm at table 4. Stacy presented the bottle. The 1982 Chateau Margaux, Mrs. Hastings. Victoria snatched the bottle from Stacy's hands, gripping it by the neck. She squinted at the label. The label is peeling at the corner, she announced loudly. This has been stored improperly. Probably near a heat vent. It's vinegar. I can assure you, the cellar is temperature and humidity controlled, Stacy replied, her voice remaining perfectly level. The peeling is common for a vintage of this age due to the glues used in the early 80s. Victoria's eyes widened. She wasn't used to the help speaking back with facts. She slammed the bottle down on the table. The loud thud made Robert jump. "Are you arguing with me?" Victoria hissed. "Do you know who I am? I could buy this building and turn it into a parking lot for my dogs." "I am simply explaining the provenance of the wine, ma'am," Stacy said. "Would you like me to open it so you can taste it?" "Open it," Victoria challenged. "If it tastes like cork, you're paying for it. That's a $5,000 bottle." Stacy deftly used the corkscrew. The cork came out with a gentle, perfect pop. She poured a small amount into a glass and swirled it. Victoria grabbed the glass, took a sip, and immediately spat it back into the glass. A collective gasp went through the room. It was a grotesque display of manners. "Disgusting!" Victoria shrieked. "It's oxidized. It tastes like battery acid. Take it away, and take this incompetence away with it." She gestured wildly, her hand striking the full water glass Stacy had poured earlier. The glass tipped over. Ice water cascaded into Victoria's lap, soaking her crimson dress. The room went dead silent. Victoria stood up, screeching like a banshee. "You idiot! You clumsy, stupid girl! Look what you did! This is a custom Valentino!" "I didn't touch the glass, ma'am," Stacy said, standing her ground. "You knocked it over." "Liar!" Victoria screamed. Her face was red, veins bulging in her neck. She pointed at Philip, who was running over. "Philip, fire her! Fire her right now! She threw water on me." Philip arrived, panting. "Mrs. Hastings, I am so sorry. I want her gone," Victoria yelled, causing diners to recoil. "I want her out on the street, and I want you to pay for this dress. It costs more than she makes in a year." She turned her venom back on Stacy. "You are nothing. You are a servant. You are dirt on the bottom of my shoe. Do you hear me? You ruined my night. You ruined my dress. And now I am going to ruin your life. I will make sure you never work in this city again." Stacy stood there, surrounded by the screaming woman, the terrified manager, and the silent, pitying stares of the other diners. Robert Hastings had his head in his hands, unable to watch. But Stacy didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't apologize. Instead, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a calm, white handkerchief. She offered it to Victoria. "You missed a spot," Stacy said. Victoria slapped the handkerchief away. "Get out of my face." "No," Stacy said. The word was soft, but it carried the weight of an anvil. Victoria froze. "Excuse me." Stacy took a step forward. The defiance in her posture shifted the energy in the room. This wasn't a waitress defending herself anymore. This was a predator shedding its camouflage. "I said no," Stacy repeated, her voice projecting clearly across the silent restaurant. "I will not be fired. And I certainly won't be paying for a dress that isn't real." Victoria's jaw dropped. "What did you say?" "The dress," Stacy said, pointing to the soaking wet fabric. "You said it's a custom Valentino. It's not. It's a knockoff. A good one, I'll admit. But Valentino uses silk crepe for this design. That is synthetic polyester blend. I can smell the plastic melting under the water." The room erupted in murmurs. Victoria looked down at her dress, then back at Stacy, her eyes wide with shock and fury. "How dare you! And the bag," Stacy continued, pointing to the handbag on the table. "Hermes Birkin, Himalayan crocodile. Supposed to be worth 300,000. The stitching on the handle is machine done. Hermes is hand-stitched. Saddle stitch specifically. That bag came from a Canal Street vendor, not a Paris atelier." Victoria was shaking now, not from cold, but from rage. "Security! Get her out of here! She's insane!" "I'm not insane, Victoria," Stacy said, using her first name without the honorific. "I'm just observant, and I'm tired of watching you bully people to hide your own insecurities." Robert Hastings slowly lifted his head. For the first time all night, he was looking at Stacy, and in his eyes there wasn't anger. There was a flicker of recognition. "Who are you?" Robert asked, his voice hoarse. Stacy turned to him, her expression softening just a fraction. "Someone who knows that the Emperor has no clothes, Mr. Hastings. Or in this case, the Empress is wearing polyester." Victoria lunged. She actually lunged across the table, her hand raised to slap Stacy across the face. "I will kill you." But the slap never connected. Stacy caught Victoria's wrist in midair. Her grip was iron. She didn't even flinch. "I wouldn't do that," Stacy whispered, leaning in close so only Victoria could hear. "Because if you touch me, I'll tell everyone in this room about the offshore account in the Caymans, the one Robert doesn't know about." Victoria's face went white. The color drained from her skin so fast she looked like a corpse. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Stacy released her wrist. Victoria stumbled back into her chair, gasping for air. The entire restaurant was watching. The invincible Victoria Hastings had been silenced by a waitress, but the night was far from over. Because Stacy Poole wasn't just a waitress, and the secrets she held were about to tear the Hastings empire apart. The silence in the Gilded Oak was heavy, the kind that usually precedes a pronouncement of death or a declaration of war. Victoria Hastings was slumped in her chair, her face a mask of porcelain terror. The mention of the Cayman Islands had struck her with the force of a physical blow, effectively severing the strings that held up her puppet show of superiority. Robert Hastings, a man who had spent the last decade navigating the treacherous waters of international shipping, finally looked at his wife with clear eyes. The fog of her constant manipulation was beginning to lift. He looked from the trembling, pale woman in the fake designer dress to the waitress who stood like a statue of justice in a polyester apron. "Cayman?" Robert repeated, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. He turned his gaze to Stacy. "What are you talking about?" Victoria found her voice, though it was shrill and cracking. "She's lying, Robert. Can't you see? She's a psychopath. She's probably a stalker. She's making things up to hurt me because I critiqued her service." "I don't think so," Robert said slowly. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He was a large man, imposing when he wanted to be, and for the first time in years, he was standing at his full height. "Victoria, you turned white as a sheet. You haven't looked that scared since the tax audit of 2018. "Robert!" Victoria gasped, clutching her chest theatrically. "My heart. I think I'm having palpitations. The stress. This girl is killing me." She slumped sideways, aiming for a graceful feint into her husband's arms. But Robert didn't move to catch her. He simply watched as she awkwardly caught herself on the edge of the table to avoid hitting the floor, ruining the performance completely. "You missed the floor too," Stacy noted dryly. Philip, the manager, rushed back to the table, wringing his hands. "Mr. Hastings, perhaps we should call a paramedic. If Mrs. Hastings is unwell—" "She's not unwell, Philip," Robert said, his voice cold. "She's caught." Robert reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a sleek, black business card. He didn't hand it to his wife. He handed it to Stacy. "My private number," Robert said. "Not the office line. The one I answer myself. Call me tomorrow morning at 9. I want to know everything." Stacy took the card, her fingers brushing his. "You might want to check the monthly withdrawals from the Charity Foundation account before we talk, Mr. Hastings. Specifically the transfers labeled consulting fees going to a shell company in Georgetown." Victoria let out a strangled cry. "Robert, don't listen to her. She's a waitress. She serves bread rolls for a living." "And you," Robert said, looking down at his wife with a mixture of pity and disgust, "apparently wear fake Valentino and steal from your husband. We're leaving." "I haven't eaten!" Victoria shrieked, realizing she was losing control of the narrative. "We're going home," Robert commanded. "Now!" He turned and walked toward the exit without waiting for her. Victoria scrambled up, grabbing her knockoff bag. She cast one last look of pure, unadulterated hatred at Stacy. "You're dead," Victoria hissed, low enough that only Stacy could hear. "You hear me? You think you're smart? You have no idea who I know. You have no idea what I can do. By tomorrow noon, you won't just be unemployed. You'll be unemployable. I will burn your life to the ground." Stacy didn't flinch. She leaned in, her voice a calm whisper. "Bring matches, Victoria. I like a fire." Victoria fled the restaurant, the sound of her heels clicking frantically on the marble like the ticking of a bomb. The moment the door closed, the restaurant exhaled. The tension broke. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Diners were pulling out their phones, likely texting everyone they knew about the scene they had just witnessed. Philip turned to Stacy, his face a mixture of awe and terror. "Stacy, what have you done?" "That was Robert Hastings. He owns half the city. And his wife, she's on the board of the Restaurant Association. She can have our license revoked." "She won't," Stacy said, picking up the tray of spilled water glasses. "She's too busy trying to cover her tracks right now. She's going to spend the next 3 hours shredding documents and deleting emails." "Who are you?" Philip asked, echoing Robert's question. "Waitresses don't know about Cayman accounts and stitching patterns on Hermes bags." Stacy paused. She looked at Philip, her eyes tired but kind. "I'm just someone who pays attention, Philip. Can I finish my shift? I still have 3 tables." Philip blinked, dumbfounded. You want to finish your shift?" "I need the tips," Stacy said, a small, enigmatic smile playing on her lips. "Rent is due on the 1st. She turned and walked back to the kitchen, leaving Philip staring at her back, wondering if he had just hired a guardian angel or a grim reaper. The next morning, the sun rose over the city skyline, gleaming off the glass towers of the financial district. But for Stacy Poole, the day began with a banging on her door that shook the thin walls of her apartment. It was 6 a.m. Stacy sat up in bed. She lived in a small studio apartment in a rundown part of the city, a stark contrast to the marble floors of the Gilded Oak. The room was sparse: a bed, a desk covered in stacks of files, and a laptop that was currently blinking with an encrypted notification. "Police! Open up!" Stacy didn't panic. She didn't look surprised. She simply slid her feet into her slippers, closed the laptop, and walked to the door. She opened it to find 2 uniformed officers and a detective in a cheap brown suit. The detective looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He held up a badge. "Stacy Poole?" "Yes." "Detective Miller, 12th Precinct. We have a warrant for your arrest." Stacy raised an eyebrow. "On what charges?" "Grand larceny and assault," Miller said, stepping into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. "Mrs. Victoria Hastings filed a report late last night. She claims you assaulted her at the Gilded Oak restaurant and stole a diamond bracelet worth $50,000 during the altercation." Stacy let out a short, dry laugh. "Of course she did. The assault was me catching her wrist before she slapped me. And I assume the bracelet is missing?" "She says you snatched it off her wrist," Miller said, looking around the small apartment with disdain. "Mind if we look around? We have a search warrant." "Be my guest," Stacy said, stepping aside. "But you won't find a bracelet, unless she paid someone to plant it here before you arrived." Miller narrowed his eyes. "Watch your mouth." The 2 uniformed officers began tearing the apartment apart. They pulled books off shelves, dumped drawers onto the floor, and stripped the bed. It was a violation, meant to intimidate. Stacy stood by the window, watching the street below. She saw a black sedan parked across the street. The windows were tinted, but she knew who was inside. Victoria wanted a front row seat to the show. "Sarge!" one of the officers yelled from the bathroom. He emerged holding a small velvet pouch. He turned it over, and a sparkling diamond tennis bracelet fell into his palm. "Found it taped behind the toilet tank." Detective Miller smirked, turning to Stacy. Well, looks like the waitress has sticky fingers. Victoria Hastings said you threatened her. Looks like she was right." Stacy looked at the bracelet. It was gaudy, too shiny. "That's cubic zirconia," she said calmly. "Set in silver, not platinum. If Victoria Hastings says that's worth $50,000, she's committing insurance fraud on top of filing a false police report." "Save it for the judge," Miller snapped. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Turn around, hands behind your back." Stacy complied. As the cold metal clicked around her wrists, she didn't struggle. She knew this was part of the game. Victoria had moved faster than she expected, using her connections to fast-track a warrant. It was sloppy, desperate, and exactly what Stacy needed. They marched her out of the building. As they led her to the squad car, Stacy looked directly at the black sedan across the street. The rear window rolled down just an inch. Victoria's face appeared, wearing oversized sunglasses and a triumphant grin. She waved a manicured hand. Stacy didn't wave back. She just stared, memorizing the scene. "Enjoy it while it lasts, Victoria," she thought. "You just handed me the weapon I need to bury you." At the precinct, Stacy was processed, fingerprinted, and thrown into a holding cell. The cell smelled of bleach and despair. She sat on the metal bench, closing her eyes. She wasn't worried about the jail time. She was counting the minutes until 9:00 a.m. At 9:15 a.m., the heavy metal door opened. Detective Miller walked in, looking annoyed. Behind him walked a man in an impeccably tailored navy suit. He carried a leather briefcase and had the sharp, predatory look of a shark in human clothing. "You made bail," Miller grunted. "This is your lawyer." Stacy looked up. "I didn't call a lawyer." The man in the suit stepped forward. "No, you didn't. Robert Hastings did." Miller rolled his eyes and left, slamming the door. The lawyer sat down opposite Stacy. "My name is Arthur Pendleton," he said, opening his briefcase. "I represent Mr. Hastings. He was distressed to hear about your arrest this morning. He finds the timing suspicious." "He should," Stacy said. "His wife planted that bracelet." "Mr. Hastings suspects as much," Arthur said, pulling out a file. However, the charges are serious. Theft over $1,000 is a felony, and with the planted evidence, it looks bad. Victoria has given a statement claiming you have been harassing her for weeks. I've worked at the restaurant for 3 days, Stacy said. Facts rarely matter when the accuser is a Hastings, Arthur noted dryly. However, Robert has instructed me to represent you. He wants to know why you told him to check the Cayman account. He checked it this morning. He found irregularities. Stacy leaned forward, the handcuffs clinking against the table. The waitress persona was gone entirely now. In her place was something much more dangerous. Irregularities is a polite word for embezzlement, Arthur, Stacy said, her voice sharp. Victoria has been siphoning money from his shipping logistics accounts for 3 years. She funnels it through a fake charity called the Beacon of Hope Foundation, then moves it to a shell company in the Caymans. She's not just buying fake handbags. She's paying off a gambling debt. Your client's wife is a high-stakes poker addict, and she's bad at it. She owes $3 million to a syndicate in Macau. Arthur stopped writing. He looked up, his mouth slightly open. How could you possibly know that? Who are you? My name isn't Stacy Poole, she said. My real name is Morgan Ashford. I'm a forensic accountant. I was hired by the board of directors of Hastings Shipping 6 months ago. They knew someone was stealing from the company, but they couldn't prove it. They suspected Robert. So I went undercover to get close to the family. I needed to see who was spending money they shouldn't have. Arthur looked stunned. You're the Ashford? The one who took down the Enron spin-offs? That's me. So why wait tables? Because Victoria Hastings is paranoid, Morgan, Stacy explained. She shreds her mail. She uses burner phones. But she's careless when she thinks she's above everyone. I needed to get her phone. Last night, when she was screaming at me about the wine, I cloned her SIM card. It took 10 seconds while she was distracted by the water spill. Arthur laughed, a short, disbelief-filled sound. You cloned her phone at the dinner table? I did. And I have everything. The bank transfers, the messages to the gambling ring, the emails to the vendor who sells her the fake designer goods so she can pocket the difference in cash. I have it all. But now you're in jail, Arthur pointed out, and she has discredited you. I'm exactly where I want to be, Morgan said. Victoria thinks she's won. She thinks I'm a helpless waitress rotting in a cell. She's going to relax. She's going to make a mistake. And when she does, we won't just fire her from the marriage. We're going to send her to federal prison. Morgan leaned back against the cold concrete wall. Get me out of here, Arthur, and tell Robert I'm ready for that meeting now. But tell him to bring security, because when Victoria finds out who I really am, she's going to try to kill me. For real this time. Arthur Pendleton's town car glided through the iron gates of the Hastings estate, a sprawling mansion that looked more like a fortress than a home. Morgan Ashford, no longer the waitress Stacy Poole, sat in the back seat, watching the manicured lawns roll by. She had traded her jail-issue clothes for a sharp, charcoal pantsuit Arthur had provided. She looked like a shark circling a reef. He's in the library, Arthur said as the car came to a stop. He hasn't slept. He's been drinking scotch since 8 a.m. He needs to be sober for what I'm about to show him, Morgan said, stepping out of the car. Inside, the house was silent. The servants were making themselves scarce, sensing the impending doom hanging over the household. Morgan walked straight to the library, pushing open the heavy mahogany doors. Robert Hastings was sitting by the unlit fireplace, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He looked 10 years older than he had the previous night at the Gilded Oak. When he saw Morgan, he didn't stand up. So, Robert said, his voice gravelly. The waitress was a spy. The waitress was a necessity, Morgan corrected, walking over to the desk and placing her laptop down. And the spy is the only one trying to save your company from bankruptcy. Robert scoffed. Bankruptcy? Hastings Shipping posted record profits last quarter. On paper, Morgan said. She opened the laptop and turned the screen toward him. In reality, your liquidity is gone. Victoria didn't just steal from your personal accounts, Robert. She gained access to the corporate reserve funds. She used your login credentials, which you foolishly wrote in a notebook in your bedside drawer. Robert stiffened. How do you know about that? Because she took a picture of it, Morgan said, clicking a file. Here, from her phone, sent to a man named Snake in Macau. Robert stared at the screen. It was a photo of his private journal, open to the page with his passwords. She's been authorizing transfers as emergency procurement costs, Morgan explained, small enough to avoid immediate red flags from the auditors, frequent enough to drain $40 million over 3 years. 40 million, Robert whispered, the glass slipping from his fingers and shattering on the rug. He didn't even notice. Why? Why would she do this? I gave her everything. The cars, the jewelry, the status. Because it's never enough for someone like Victoria, Morgan said ruthlessly. She has a hole inside her that money can't fill. She's addicted to the thrill of the risk. The gambling debts are just a symptom. The disease is her narcissism. She thinks she's smarter than you. She thinks she deserves it all. Morgan pulled up another audio file. And regarding the bracelet she claimed I stole, listen to this. She pressed play. It was a recording from the cloned phone, time-stamped 5 minutes after they left the restaurant. Victoria's voice, shrill and panicked. Listen to me, you idiot. I need you to go to the apartment on 4th Street, the one I rented for the housekeeper last year. No, the new girl lives there now. I looked up her file. Break in. Plant the tennis bracelet behind the toilet. Yes, the fake one. I'm not wasting the real diamonds on a frame-up. Just do it before the police get there. The recording ended. The silence in the library was deafening. Robert stood up slowly. His face had changed. The sorrow was gone, replaced by a cold, hard rage that was terrifying to behold. He walked over to the window and looked out at the estate his wife had turned into a prison of lies. She's hosting a gala tonight, Robert said softly. The Beacon of Hope charity ball. She's been planning it for months. Everyone will be there. The mayor, the board members, the press. The perfect venue, Morgan said, closing her laptop. She's expecting a victory lap. She thinks I'm in jail. She thinks you're a clueless husband who will sign whatever check she puts in front of him. Robert turned to face Morgan. I want to destroy her. We will, Morgan promised. But we do it my way. If you fire her or divorce her quietly, she gets half. She walks away with millions and spins the story that you were abusive. We need to dismantle her reputation so thoroughly that no lawyer in this city will touch her. What do you need me to do? Robert asked. Tonight you play the loving husband, Morgan said. You go to the gala. You smile. You hold her hand. You let her think she's the queen of the world. And then, Morgan smiled, a predatory expression that matched the coldness of her eyes. Then I'll arrive. Robert nodded. Arthur said you were the best. He wasn't lying. I'm expensive, Robert, Morgan reminded him. My fee just doubled. Worth every penny, Robert said. Let's burn the witch. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of silk, velvet, and old money. Chandeliers the size of small cars glittered overhead, casting a golden glow on the city's elite. At the center of it all was Victoria Hastings. She was radiant, in a way that radioactive waste is radiant. She wore a dress that actually was a custom Valentino this time, bought with the latest transfer from the corporate reserve. She moved through the crowd, accepting compliments, her laugh tinkling like broken glass. "Oh, stop it, Senator," Victoria cooed, placing a hand on the arm of an older man. "The beacon of hope is just my little passions project. I just can't bear the thought of children going hungry." Robert stood by her side, a stiff smile plastered on his face. He looked like a wax figure. Every time Victoria touched him, he had to fight the urge to recoil. "You're quiet tonight, darling," Victoria whispered, pinching his arm sharply while smiling at a photographer. "Smile. You look like you're at a funeral." "Just tired, Victoria," Robert muttered. "It's been a long day." "Well, wake up," she hissed. "I need you to announce the $1 million donation from Hastings Shipping during the keynote speech. It's the climax of the evening." "Oh, there will be a climax," Robert said, taking a sip of champagne. Victoria narrowed her eyes, sensing something off, but she was distracted by the arrival of the press. Flashbulbs popped. She preened, turning her good side to the cameras. She felt invincible. The waitress was in a cell. Her husband was under her thumb. The money was safe in the Caymans. The orchestra stopped playing. A hush fell over the room as the MC took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the woman of the hour, the heart and soul of the Beacon of Hope Foundation, Mrs. Victoria Hastings." Applause thundered. Victoria walked up the stairs to the stage, waving like royalty. She took the microphone, basking in the adoration. Thank you all so much," she began, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "When I started this foundation, I had nothing but a dream to help those who cannot help themselves." At the back of the ballroom, the heavy double doors swung open with a loud boom. Heads turned. The applause died down. Walking down the center aisle was not a guest. It was Morgan Ashford. She was wearing a dress of midnight blue silk that fit like a second skin, a stark contrast to the waitress uniform she had worn 24 hours ago. Her hair was slicked back, her makeup sharp and severe. She walked with the confidence of an executioner. Flanked on either side of her were 4 uniformed federal agents. Victoria froze on stage. The microphone dipped in her hand. She squinted against the spotlight. Who is that?" Morgan didn't stop until she reached the base of the stage. She looked up at Victoria, crossing her arms. "I think you know who I am, Victoria," Morgan's voice projected clearly, even without a microphone. "Security!" Victoria shrieked, her composure shattering instantly. "Get this woman out of here! She's a criminal! She's a stalker!" 2 security guards moved toward Morgan, but the federal agents stepped in front of her, flashing their badges. The guards backed off immediately. "I'm not a stalker, Victoria," Morgan said, climbing the stairs onto the stage. She took the microphone from Victoria's limp hand. "And I'm certainly not a waitress." The room was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop on the carpet. "My name is Morgan Ashford," she announced to the crowd. "I am a forensic auditor for the Federal Trade Commission, currently contracted by the Board of Hastings Shipping." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The senator took a step back. The donors exchanged nervous glances. Victoria grabbed Morgan's arm. "You can't do this! You signed a confidentiality agreement! You're lying!" Morgan shook her off effortlessly. "I didn't sign anything, Victoria. But you did. You signed 17 fraudulent wire transfer requests in the last month alone." Morgan signaled to the tech booth. "Robert, if you please." Robert Hastings stepped out from the shadows of the wings on stage. He held a remote control. He looked at his wife with eyes devoid of love. "Robert?" Victoria whimpered. "Robert, what are you doing? Help me." "I am helping you," Robert said coldly. "I'm helping you with your truth." He pressed the button. The massive projection screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the logo of the charity, flickered and changed. It wasn't a charity video. It was a bank statement. "This," Morgan narrated, pointing to the screen, "is the ledger for the Beacon of Hope Foundation. As you can see, 98% of the donations, including the money you all gave tonight, are transferred within 24 hours to an account in the Cayman Islands held by VH Holdings." The image changed. It was a video. The video of Victoria at a private poker table in a basement in Macau, throwing chips onto the table while smoking a cigar. Video Victoria. "Raise it another 50,000. My husband's company is a bottomless pit. He doesn't notice a thing. He's pathetic." The crowd erupted. It was chaos. People were shouting. The senator looked like he was going to be sick. On stage, Victoria was hyperventilating. She looked at the screen, then at the crowd, then at Robert. "It's a deep fake. It's AI. They're framing me." "And the phone call?" Morgan asked, pulling out her phone and holding it up to the microphone. She played the recording of Victoria ordering the frame-up with the bracelet. Victoria's voice. "Plant the tennis bracelet behind the toilet." The recording echoed through the ballroom. It was the final nail in the coffin. Victoria lunged at Morgan. "I'll kill you! You ruined everything!" She barely made it 2 steps before the federal agents were on her. They didn't treat her like a socialite. They treated her like a threat. One agent spun her around, forcing her arms behind her back. The sound of handcuffs clicking was louder than the applause had been. "Victoria Hastings," the lead agent announced. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, grand larceny, and filing a false police report." Victoria was screaming, thrashing, her Valentino dress twisting, her makeup smearing. "Robert, do something! I'm your wife!" Robert walked over to her. He leaned in, close, so only she could hear him over the screaming crowd. "No," Robert said. "You're an investment that went bad, and I'm liquidating my assets." He turned his back on her. As the agents dragged Victoria down the stairs and through the aisle of stunned socialites, she locked eyes with Morgan one last time. There was no arrogance left, only the terrified realization that the waitress she had mocked had just ended her life. Morgan stood on the stage, watching the doors close behind the screaming woman. She adjusted her jacket, looked at the stunned audience, and spoke into the microphone one last time. "I apologize for the interruption. Please, enjoy the dessert. I hear the lemon caper reduction is excellent." She dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a thud. 3 months had passed since the night of the gala, but the ripples of Victoria Hastings' downfall were still being felt across the city. The scandal had dominated the news cycle for weeks. "The waitress who took down an empire" was the headline that wouldn't die, though few knew the waitress was actually Morgan Ashford, the most feared forensic auditor on the East Coast. The trial of the People vs. Victoria Hastings was not the sensational circus Victoria had hoped for. She had expected her high society friends to rally around her, to testify to her character. She expected Robert to crumble under the pressure and drop the charges. She was wrong. The courtroom was packed, but the gallery wasn't filled with supporters. It was filled with victims. The sheer scope of Victoria's fraud had come to light during discovery. It wasn't just Robert she had stolen from. She had swindled boutique owners, stiffed event planners, and even defrauded the local animal shelter she claimed to support. Morgan sat in the back row of the courtroom on the day of the sentencing. She wore a simple beige trench coat, blending into the background. She wasn't there to gloat. She was there to verify. In her line of work, you didn't celebrate until the ink was dry on the conviction. Victoria stood before the judge. The months in remand had not been kind to her. Her hair, once dyed a perfect honey blonde, was showing inches of grey roots. Her face was gaunt, stripped of the expensive fillers and treatments she could no longer afford. She wore a standard-issue orange jumpsuit that fit worse than the polyester dress she had mocked Stacy for wearing. "Mrs. Hastings," Judge Patterson said, peering over his glasses. "In my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a case of such staggering narcissism and greed. You didn't steal to survive. You stole to maintain an illusion of superiority. You destroyed lives to buy handbags." Victoria sobbed, but it was a dry, performative sound. "I made mistakes, Your Honor. I was under pressure. My husband, he neglected me." "Your husband," the judge interrupted, his voice like a gavel strike, "is the only reason you aren't facing federal RICO charges for your involvement with the Macau gambling syndicate. He cooperated fully. You, however, have shown zero remorse." The judge shuffled his papers. The room held its breath. "Victoria Hastings, I hereby sentence you to 15 years in a federal correctional facility with no possibility of parole for the first 10. Furthermore, you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $42 million. Your assets, including personal property and jewelry, have already been seized to begin this payment." The gavel came down with a final, booming crack. Victoria screamed. It was a raw, primal sound of a woman realizing her life was over. "Robert! Robert, look at me!" Robert Hastings was sitting in the front row. He didn't turn around. He didn't flinch. He simply picked up his briefcase, stood up, and walked out of the courtroom without a backward glance. 2 hours later, Morgan walked into the executive office of Hastings Shipping. The atmosphere had changed. The frantic, terrified energy that had permeated the building months ago was gone, replaced by the steady hum of productivity. Robert was standing by the window, looking out at the harbor where his ships were being loaded. He looked healthier. The dark circles under his eyes were gone. He turned when Morgan entered. "It's done," Morgan said simply. 15 years, Robert mused. It seems like a long time, and yet not long enough for what she did to the people who trusted her. He walked over to his desk and picked up a check. He handed it to Morgan. "Your final fee," Robert said, "plus a bonus, a significant one." Morgan glanced at the check. It was double what they had agreed upon. She didn't feign modesty. She folded it and placed it in her pocket. "Thank you. This covers the hazard pay. My apartment door still needs fixing from the police raid." Robert chuckled, a genuine sound. "I took the liberty of handling that. And the building. I bought your apartment building, Morgan. The rent is stabilized for all tenants, and the security has been upgraded. Consider it a parting gift." Morgan raised an eyebrow. "You bought the building?" "I'm finding that using my money for actual people feels better than hoarding it," Robert said. "I also bought the Gilded Oak." Morgan smiled. "Let me guess. Philip is still the manager?" "He is, and Chloe is now the head hostess. We fired the chef, though. You were right about the lemon caper reduction. It was terrible." Robert sat on the edge of his desk. "Stay, Morgan. I need a CFO. Someone who can spot a lie from a mile away. I'll pay you whatever you want." It was a tempting offer. Stability. Power. A corner office with a view of the ocean. Morgan looked around the office, then back at Robert. She shook her head slowly. "I can't, Robert." "Why not? You saved this company." "Because there are other Roberts out there," Morgan said, her eyes darkening slightly. "And more importantly, there are other Victorias. People who think they are untouchable. People who treat the world like their personal playground and the rest of us like NPCs in their game. I'm not an executive, Robert. I'm a cleaner. And the world is still very dirty." Robert nodded, understanding. He extended his hand. "Well, if you ever need a reference, or a table at the Gilded Oak. "I'll keep that in mind," Morgan said, shaking his hand firmly. She turned and walked toward the elevator. "One question," Robert called out just before the doors closed. "The wine, the 1982 Bordeaux, was it actually oxidized?" Morgan smirked as she pressed the lobby button. "No, it was perfect. She just didn't have the palate to appreciate it." The door slid shut. Morgan walked out of the Hastings Tower and onto the busy street. She pulled her phone from her pocket. She had a new message from an encrypted number. Target: Silas Vane, hedge fund manager. Suspected of pension fund embezzlement. He frequents a high-end golf club in the Hamptons. They are hiring caddies. Morgan deleted the message. She hailed a cab. "Where to, lady?" the driver asked. "The airport," Morgan said, pulling a new ID out of her purse. "And then, the Hamptons." She looked out the window as the city blurred by. Victoria Hastings was a memory, a cautionary tale rotting in a cell. But the work continued. Everyone feared the millionaire's wife until the waitress made her look ridiculous. But they should have feared the waitress all along. This story isn't just about a rude customer getting her comeuppance. It's a reminder that true power isn't about how loudly you can scream or how much your handbag costs. It's about competence, observation, and the truth. Victoria Hastings thought her wealth made her bulletproof, but she forgot that when you treat people like dirt, eventually the dirt fights back. Morgan Ashford proves that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you overlook. If you enjoyed this satisfying tale of instant karma and justice served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder to be kind to service staff, and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have plenty more drama, twists, and karma coming your way. Thanks for watching.